Man, let me tell you something. When the world thought the story was already written, when people believed there was only one author holding the pen, India stepped up, snatched that pen, flipped open the book of history, and started writing its own chapter. That right there is what we call a big move. And when India made this move against America, it wasn't just a strategy on paper. It wasn't just politics. It wasn't just some quiet handshake in the back rooms of power. No, it was a statement. A loud, bold, unapologetic statement that echoed across the globe. We are no longer playing second fiddle to anybody. We are not your backup plan. We are not your follower. We are not here to take instructions. We are here to set the tempo. Now, when that kind of move happens, you better believe the world feels it. America felt it. Europe felt it. Asia felt it. And the streets, the people, the nations, they all turned their heads because this wasn't a minor decision. This was India stepping into its full self, saying, "We are not the India of yesterday. We are the India of tomorrow. And that tomorrow starts today." That's why it shocked the world. Because the world didn't expect it to be this bold, this fast, and this powerful. See, America is used to being in the driver's seat. They like to control the steering wheel of the global ride. And for a long time, India sat in the back seat, letting them drive, letting them set the direction. But somewhere along the way, India realized something. It realized the driver ain't as perfect as they look. The roads America was choosing were bumpy, they were self-serving, and they didn't lead to a destination that worked for everybody. And that's when India leaned forward, tapped America on the shoulder and said, "Slide over. I can drive this better." That's the big move I'm talking about. And it ain't just about politics, it's deeper. It's about respect. Because respect isn't given, it's earned, and India earned it. India earned it through sweat, through sacrifice, through resilience, through nights of hard work, through decades of being underestimated, through centuries of struggle. And now, when the respect finally showed up at India's doorstep, India wasn't begging for it. It demanded it. That's why America was shocked, because the kid they thought would always be in the classroom learning is now standing at the blackboard teaching the lesson. Now let's talk real. America thought it had a grip on the world economy. It thought the dollar was the crown, the military was the shield, and the technology was the sword. But India stepped in and showed another way. India said, "You got dollars, we got demand. You got weapons, we got brains. You got history, but we got the future." And the truth is, the future always beats the past. That's the power shift nobody saw coming. When India makes moves like this, it's not only making decisions for itself, it's changing the balance of power everywhere. Countries that used to whisper are now speaking up. Nations that stayed neutral are now choosing sides. And allies that once ignored India are now calling its phone, because when you've got leverage, when you've got strength, when you've got courage, you don't have to chase opportunities. Opportunities start chasing you. Let me break this down. Imagine a table where everyone's been sitting, eating and deciding the menu. For the longest time, America was the one holding the knife, carving up the portions, deciding who gets what. And India was the one waiting, hoping for a fair slice. But this time, India walked in with its own plate, its own knife, its own fork, and said, "Don't worry about feeding me. I'll serve myself." Now that right there shook the room. Because when you start serving yourself, people realize they can't control your hunger anymore. And what's beautiful about this is India didn't just arrive with confidence, it arrived with receipts. Receipts of growth, receipts of innovation, receipts of resilience. While others stumbled in crisis, India kept moving. While others slowed down, India sped up. While others spent time controlling others, India spent time controlling itself, building itself. That's why the move against America wasn't a tantrum. It was a calculation. It was rooted in numbers, in strength, in proof. And that's why it landed so hard on the global stage. You got to understand, when you rise, people get nervous. The old power doesn't like the new power. It feels like somebody walking into your house and rearranging the furniture. It makes you uncomfortable. That's what America felt. Because for the first time in a long time, somebody said, we don't need to sit where you tell us. We'll sit where we belong. India's move was more than economic, more than political. It was psychological. It sent a message to every nation out there that has been waiting, doubting itself, holding back. The message was simple. If you know your worth, stop waiting for permission. Stop letting somebody else write your story. Take the pen, flip the script, and watch the world adjust. That's leadership, and leadership doesn't ask, it acts. Now, let's be clear. The shock wasn't just in America. The shock was in every boardroom, every parliament, every newsroom, every living room. Because people who thought they understood the game suddenly realized the rules had changed. The referee wasn't who they thought it was anymore. And when the referee changes, the whole game feels different. Think about it. How many decades did people look at America as the ceiling, like that's as high as you can go? And suddenly, India shows up and starts breaking through that ceiling, proving the roof wasn't the limit, the sky wasn't the limit. It was only the beginning. That inspires the rest of the world. It makes people look at themselves differently. See, the truth is, America underestimated the power of hunger. Comfort weakens you, but hunger makes you sharp. And India's been hungry. Hungry for growth, hungry for respect, hungry for leadership. That hunger built an engine that just doesn't stop. While others slowed down to enjoy comfort, India kept climbing. And now the ones who relaxed are shocked that the hungry one overtook them. That's how it works in life. Hunger beats comfort every single time. And let's talk about the people. Because none of this is possible without the people. 1 billion plus strong, dreaming, building, hustling, grinding. That's not just a population. That's power. That's a workforce. That's a market. That's a brain bank. That's a soul force. And when you take that power and align it with vision, discipline, and courage, you create something unstoppable. That's the engine behind this big move. America thought India would always look up to it. But now America's looking sideways, realizing there's somebody right there, shoulder to shoulder, matching stride for stride. And when the race gets close, the respect changes. That's the shock. It wasn't just a move. It was a wake-up call. And here's the thing. The world is watching and the world is choosing. Every nation is asking itself, do we stick to the old system? Or do we ride with a new momentum? And you can already see the shift. Because people like winners, people like strength, people like vision. And right now, India is serving all three. But let me tell you what I love most about this. India didn't rise by copying America. It didn't rise by being a shadow. It rose by being itself, by leaning into its culture, its history, its resilience, its innovation, its values. That authenticity is what makes the move so powerful. Because when you know who you are, nobody can use your identity against you. This big move against America, it's not about war. It's not about hate. It's not about division. It's about independence. It's about freedom. It's about finally standing up and saying, we're not afraid of your dominance. We're not afraid of your opinion. We're not afraid of your pressure. We walk our own path. And when you do that, the world doesn't just watch. It respects. That's why the world is shocked. Because they didn't expect it. They thought the system would keep rolling the way it always had. But nothing lasts forever. And right now, India's proven that the future doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the strongest, the hungriest, the boldest, The one who dares to move when everybody else stays still. And let me say this one last thing. The shockwave from India's move didn't end with America. It rippled through the entire global order. Nations are rethinking alliances, rethinking strategies, rethinking possibilities. Because if India can step up like this, maybe they can too. And when that thought catches fire, when nations start believing in their own power, the world shifts forever. The shock isn't that India stood up to America. The shock is that the world stood with India. Because let me tell you something, standing up alone is one thing, but standing up and having the crowd cheer you on, that's a whole different level of power. For decades, people thought if you ever challenged America, you stood alone. You'd be isolated, sanctioned, cornered, and left begging for mercy. But this time, when India stood tall, the rest of the world didn't run away. They leaned in closer. They said, you know what? Maybe India's onto something. Maybe this is the moment we've been waiting for. See, the old belief was that America was untouchable, unchallengeable, that if you raised your voice against them, you'd pay the price. And yes, many nations in the past tried, but they couldn't carry the weight. They couldn't handle the pushback. They couldn't find allies who were willing to risk their comfort. That's why those challenges faded out like smoke in the wind. But India walked into the room with 1 billion people at its back, with a booming economy, with a military rising in strength, with a tech sector taking off, and with cultural pride that couldn't be broken. That's not just a challenge, that's a movement. And a movement doesn't walk alone. A movement attracts others who've been waiting, watching, and quietly hoping for somebody to take the first step. And boy, did the first step shake the ground. Because the world had been sitting in silence, feeling the weight of American dominance, but not knowing how to break it. Countries in Africa, nations in Latin America, the whole global South, they'd been dealing with decades of being told what to do, how to trade, where to align, who to favor. They were tired. And when India finally stood up, it was like somebody pulled back the curtain and showed that you don't have to play by those rules anymore. What shocked the world wasn't just India's courage, it was how quickly others followed. Because let me tell you, courage is contagious. When you see somebody break free, suddenly you realize you can too. And nations that used to whisper about independence started saying it loud. Nations that used to quietly question America's grip began openly admiring India's boldness. And that's when it became clear India wasn't standing up alone, it was standing up as a mirror for the world. Think about it this way. For years, America sat at the head of the global table, carving the meat, pouring the drinks, and handing out slices of bread like it owned the bakery. And everybody else just sat there smiling, nodding, saying thank you for crumbs. But this time, India didn't just pull out its own chair. It flipped the whole table. And what surprised everybody was that the rest of the room didn't scold India for making a mess. No. They started clapping. They said, finally, somebody had the guts to do it. That's the real shock. Because when one voice turns into many, when one act turns into a movement, that's when the power really shifts. And America wasn't prepared for that. They thought India would be another rebel nation they could box in, but they underestimated the moment. They underestimated how the world feels about injustice, about double standards, about being treated as less. They underestimated how long people have been waiting for a leader to stand up and prove it could be done. And India became that leader, not by asking permission, not by waiting for approval, but by acting like it already owned the respect it deserved. Now let's be real. This wasn't just about politics. It was about dignity. Nations all over the world saw India say, we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be lectured. We're not going to be pressured. And deep down, They felt the same way about their own struggles. India gave them language. India gave them courage. India gave them proof that standing up doesn't mean standing alone anymore. That's why the shock was so powerful. Because it wasn't just India versus America. It was India showing the world what was possible. And when that happens, alliances shift. The same countries that America thought it had in its back pocket started whispering to India. Leaders who used to stay silent in the room started raising their hands. Even some of America's closest allies had to pause because they saw the writing on the wall. The future doesn't belong to the old guard anymore. The future belongs to those who dare to lead differently. The shock is that the world didn't criticize India for standing tall. They admired it. They didn't say, sit down. They said, stand taller. And that shift is what scares America most. Because when you lose the monopoly on respect, when you lose the monopoly on influence, you start to realize you don't own the room anymore. And let me tell you, America has never been used to that feeling. Now picture this. A young man in a crowded room finally speaks up against the bully, and instead of everybody looking away, they all stand beside him. That bully may still have size, still have history, still have strength, but his power is broken because his power never came from just his fists. It came from the fear of everybody else. And once the fear is gone, the fight is already over. That's what happened here. America's power didn't vanish overnight, but the fear of standing against it started to fade. And India was the spark. You can feel it in the energy of nations now. Africa is saying, we can trade differently. Latin America is saying, we don't need to keep begging for handouts. Asia is saying, we can rise together. Even Europe, cautious as it is, has started looking at India as not just a partner, but as a peer. And when peers multiply, when respect spreads, the old balance crumbles. See, people think the shock is about confrontation.